Welcome to the Red Iron Retail Roundtable. I'm your host, Jeff Williamson. In the podcast today, we're discussing the concept of unified commerce to find out whether it's just a buzzword or, in fact, the future of retail. Joining us today are Jeff Patterson, CTO at Red Iron, with over 2 decades of experience. Welcome, Jeff.
Hey there.
And Barry Eggerter, Red Iron's COO, with 6 years at the company and a wealth of knowledge in retail tech. Welcome back, Barry.
Thanks, Jeff.
Together, they bring a unique perspective on retail technology solutions that will help keep you in the know. If you haven't heard of us, we're Red Iron, a systems integrator that allows retailers to get the most out of their systems. Whether you're looking to implement a new system or update an existing one, Red Iron has everything you need for retail success. So tune in as we discuss strategies for navigating digital transformation and discover all the ways that Red Iron can help your business succeed. So head over to redirontech.com for more information about our services, or follow us on social media for all retail news and updates. Fellas, just a few weeks ago, Cole Haan announced that it was moving towards a unified commerce strategy with the assistance of Aptos. It was stated that the move would reflect the company's commitment to keep pace with the evolving expectations of consumers. The first stage of the new platform rollout would provide Cole Haan with the mobile-first and cloud-native POS system. Cole Haan is on a long list of many other companies that have stated their desire to work towards a unified commerce platform or solution, and it got us thinking here at the Roundtable, what really is unified commerce? By now, we have all heard of omnichannel retailing, but this new style of system seems to have arrived rather quickly. So today we are going to cover what really is unified retail and if it is indeed the future. So to start us off, let's talk about some of the other previous styles and channels that retail has taken throughout history so we can better understand what exactly is the difference with unified commerce. We started out with a single channel and multi-channel, and there's cross-channel, and of course, omni-channel, which everybody has heard about. We started out with just a singular register in the store where all the transactions were done, and now we're talking about a singular platform connected to front and back end systems, so you have the most consistent and accurate information about your shoppers, but also in things like your product and inventory. So, Jeff, if you could start us off and comment on exactly how we got here and what the difference between some of those channels and what we're talking about today with unified commerce is.
Sure. No, that's a good summary. I mean, essentially, we got here. I mean, once for a long time, commerce just meant face to face, in person. I'm selling you something, you're giving me cash or a check, and then electronic payment. And then when the online shopping started, this was the inevitable result. I mean, you want to, like, people don't distinguish when they're buying something from the Gap. They don't think I'm buying from the Gap e-commerce store, I'm buying from the Gap in person.
Right.
They just think I'm buying from this entity, it's selling me stuff, it has content. They don't know or need to know the inner workings of that. So what unified commerce is just saying, I'm store X, regardless of how you interact with me. And that sounds fairly simple, and is simple, but it's not easy. I mean, what has to happen is a multitude of systems have to talk, and you're always, just getting closer and closer. And as you get closer, there are sort of more avenues that you want to integrate. So, you can integrate your selling channels in terms of, the data is flowing up and I'm seeing all the sales in one funnel, but my customer outreach now is sort of bifurcated or splintered more than twice. And so then you try and get a handle on your customer communication. And it's like, well, all my vendor control is now sort of separate. So everything that, in every way, you're always trying to squeeze the complexity and friction out of your organization. And that's where the organization and the customer's desires align, right? The customer wants a nice, seamless, frictionless interaction with the company. The company wants that, and to be able to not leak a lot of the customer data, which is one of the byproducts of a splintered system, is you're leaking a lot of information out that could be otherwise valuable, or even just it could provide you better context in terms of purchasing decisions. It could provide you a more meaningful interaction with your customers. All of those things are benefits. It's just, so I feel like, there will probably be another name after unified commerce. I mean, we're always trying to get there a little bit. You still have social media with that sort of hangs off the side of all this, and that'll get integrated at some point where, I'm having a much more interactive engagement with my customer, if that's what they desire. I mean, that ain't my thing, but customers especially, feel like if they have retailers that they want to frequent again and again, there's a desire out there to have sort of they want to be on the inside getting the first looks at things, and all of that is part of commerce, right? And so the
Yep.
envelope of what is my system framework is expanding, and at each level of expansion, we're trying to make that more holistic and integrated and less fragmentary. So I don't know, Barry, if you want to
Yeah,
add anything
no,
to it.
for sure. I mean, it's interesting because we've been in this business for so long. We've seen the transition over time, and we've faced a lot of those challenges, trying to
Yep.
make sure
Mhm.
that those that we work with keep improving their systems. And there's a couple of components to it, as Jeff talked to. I mean, when it comes down to it, it's silos, right? So
Yeah.
you start out with a single silo, as he said. You're in the store. You're always talking to someone at the store to interact with that business, that retailer, and do your transactional work. And then when online came about and there was a couple of different channels, there's a couple of silos, right? And typically with those silos, each of them has a tech stack or a technical component that's driving it, right? But they're not necessarily the same, and they're not sharing information. So just by the nature of, like Jeff alluded to, it evolved, and it's just because, okay, first we're going to focus on that brick and mortar experience. We're going to make sure everything's running well there. Oh, we have this new means to sell through online, so we're going to put up a team and a platform and get that running. Then over time, you're trying to make sure that the online and the offline or the in-store share information about that customer, so that your marketing team can drive, information out. And trying to get the information from one system to another in real time and a holistic view is just challenging when you have so many silos. So over time, the more channels or the more means by which you could sell, the more challenging it becomes to unify it, right? And when you say unified commerce, you're really talking about, customer centric, and you're saying, like Jeff says, the customer, we ourselves don't look at a business as separate businesses depending on how we're buying. It's just, I want the product. I know they carry it. I know, how I can acquire it. I'm going to go interact. And really the information that's siloed into those systems, the best efforts to try to, integrate that between the systems and share that information and get closer to real time also allows the retailers to have a better view of their product, right? And their inventory. So, so it's a combination of knowing what product you have, how much you have, where it is, and who's buying it. And the closer you get to a unified commerce situation, the more it's like, instead of a bunch of different tech stacks, it's more of a singular platform that just knows about all those different channels and shares that information. Whereas, over time, it's hooking a bunch of different things together to simulate that, but it's not necessarily a pure implementation of that. So it's kind of like the tech and the resourcing behind it has to catch up with implementing the right technologies and the right ways of sharing that information. And there's a bunch of different things that are involved in making that happen. So I'm sure we'll talk more about that through the discussion today.
Yeah, I think you guys are absolutely right. I certainly don't, I don't perceive a difference between the retailer and whether I'm shopping online or I'm walking into the store. I do know one thing though, and that is I do get a bit annoyed if I look at a website and it tells me there's 5 things in stock that I need and I get there and it's not there.
Right.
So it as always, it's a journey and not a destination, I think, is one thing that I'm hearing. And then also another thing we might want to touch back on a little bit is Jeff, you mentioned data leakage. So when we decouple things, we move to a singular system as opposed to something like omni-channel, where it's a lot of different silos that we're trying to link together in a way that can communicate and be effective. Is that something that can eliminate something like that? And what would some of the ramifications be of something like data leakage?
Right. Well, I mean, data leakage is just saying, I have information that is not escaping the bounds of system A, where, system B could use it, but there's, the data is is either, ill-suited for the purpose, it's not sort of easily consumed, or I've just got, my backlog is 3 years long and I just haven't got there yet, sort of thing. But I mean, that's the sort of thing where, you might have, there's lots of people who have purchase histories that represent the means of purchase, right? So I've got a store X will have an in-store purchase history for me and an online purchase history for me, and it's like, well, I'm the same dude, right?
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I have purchasing patterns that you could otherwise recognize, but because you've got, because your systems aren't nicely integrated, or the other challenge in terms of data leakage is that there's just data that's not collected in one system where it could be. So, because you have different modes of interaction. So your in-person selling typically has different, because you've got mediated selling, you've got a cashier in there, and you've got sort of a different flow to it, where I'm not searching products I'm not sharing with you what products I'm searching for in the store, but on the web, I am sharing with you what products I'm searching for. So there's the some of the data leakage and data loss is driven by the fact that you just have different modes of operation in the two different sort of platforms and X different platforms. I think a lot of the next generation is going to be, more and innovative selling avenues that sort of bypass your traditional. It's not just your corporate website, you're also selling through affinity websites, and you're getting information through that. And so you've got to sort of come to grips with how all of this comes together. So, I mean, what you're in the end, the best you're going to do, I mean, you're always going to be chasing this. You're not going to be perfect, right? So what you're trying to do is just assess, where is my biggest disconnect in terms of the customer experience, and try and work on that, and then see, and hopefully working on that doesn't mean throwing everything you've got away, because you still have to stay in business and not be down for X years. But so it's a challenge that we navigate with our retailers all the time. It's like, what is the biggest pain point in this sort of in your system framework that doesn't allow you to sort of fully take advantage of the goal, which is sort of a unified commerce system? How can we bridge some of those gaps? How can we get you a little closer? And it's just that over and over and over again until those differences and those gaps narrow over time, ideally, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
So thanks for that, Jeff. Moving on. So omni-channel is a term everybody's obviously heard of, and sort of had a grip on the way that in the narrative that we should try and shape our customer interaction, or at least retailers should shape their customer interactions. So now with the rise of unified commerce, what in your words, Barry, would you put omni-channel, and where did that go? Is that still there? And if unified commerce is the thing now, was omni-channel not quite what it was all cracked up to be? What are your thoughts there?
It's an interesting question, because I think we're talking about a progression path, right? So omnichannel to me is kind of where most people are these days. I think that's kind of the landing place at this point in time. Over the course of history, it's taken many years to go from one layer to the next. And I'd say most people are in omnichannel these days, and if they're not, they're getting close to it. And a lot of that comes with the technology. So it's also just making sure the tech that's being provided to the retailers fits that mold and provides those features and those functionality, because it's certainly gone beyond where a retailer can do this themselves. It's really dependent on the vendors and the platforms to provide a lot of that, right? So the competitive marketplace in tech is such that it's always evolving and going closer and closer to that. I think the unified commerce concept is probably not in play in very many places, because it's going to be very platform dependent to do that. And I just can't picture too many people in that particular space at this point. I know the announcement we talked about leads you into, hey, we're going that route. It doesn't mean you're there, and it's still an aspirational thing, right? So to me, omnichannel, I would sum up in saying that's where people are. That's where they should be at this point in time. And unified commerce would be the ideal, right?
Yeah.
Because it's really getting you all the way there to say, that customer interaction is perfected, because they know, the customer knows who the business is, the business knows who the customer is, and we know everything that's happening with that customer, every interaction, every touch point, every product or wish list that they have in their carts. We know how to leverage that information, and it's not siloed, and it's not technically barred from one platform to the other, or the information's not split off where we don't have what Jeff's talking about with leakage, right? So to me, it's kind of touches on what you said earlier, Jeff, about the e-com situation where they say, I got 5 of these. I go to the store, I don't have 5. They actually don't have any, and haven't had for a week. That's what you're trying to solve, right? And omnichannel doesn't even solve that necessarily. Unified promises to solve that. But that's why I say I don't think many people are actually there yet. The information is still being shuffled about between the systems, between the silos, and working as best as possible to get you there. So, common tech like cloud, like APIs, anything where there's a centralized data store and there's a real-time kind of mechanism for information transfer, that's allowing that progression to happen. But I think in the absence of that, the old school approach where it's flat files and it's a nightly import or export, and you got a period of time where the systems are out of date, and then they try to resync, but then inevitably, even at the resync, they're already out of date again. So it's shifted from that over time, and I think that's why looking forward, as Jeff alluded to, the unified commerce approach is something that is where we're headed, and we'll probably have yet another category after unified. But really, it's an evolution of both the technology, the businesses that perform the retail operations, and now the information storage and cloud providers and infrastructure providers to enable all of that.
And I think if you look at the names, I mean, Omni is many, right? I mean, so it's like we got an e pluribus unum thing that we need to do. In that, it's just omni-channel just means I've got many ways of interacting with my customer, but it exposes the weakness of that, in that I've got many ways of interacting with my customer, and so the customer is looking at the communications and the interactions and saying, well, I don't get this. Why I bought this online? Why can't I just go to the store and return it? It's
right.
And I think the other thing you highlight with your example with the it says there are 5. It's it's not just systems. It's also changing the way people view their role and do their work. So if you have a typical bricks and mortar store and your item count is out, who cares? It's on the shelf. People can't buy what's not on the shelf. When you introduce fulfillment from a centralized system, you have to know what's on the shelf. And so there's a different emphasis on making sure the counts are right, making sure that you don't have, you're keeping your inventories proper. So I mean, it's not just system based. It's also, you got to change the focus of your employees in terms of how they interact. And that's the same, in your online experience. Maybe you should be trying to entice people to go to your store because it's there where they'll have a more tactile interaction with your products versus just searching them up. It's like if you walk into a store that's nicely presented, you might be enticed to buy even more that you wouldn't online. So both of them have a ways to go in terms of making sure that we're squeezing every bit of value we can out of both investments, right? So I think that there's this is a long road that I imagine that there's a whole road past this road, right? Like, so you can always go further.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're right that it's not just about systems too, because maybe I look up that there's 5 in the store, and maybe there are 5 in that store. They're just not where I expect them to be for whatever reason. Maybe a person's misplaced them, maybe another customer's grabbed them and put them down somewhere else. And so there's all sorts of other factors to contribute as well. So it's unified commerce. It's largely platform dependent. We're getting there. It's where we're headed, we think. As technology improves, we get closer and closer. There'll be a few more iterations in between. I don't want to think too much about what the what those would be called. Maybe
Right.
omni, uni, hyper, mega, commerce. I don't know, something funny like that.
Omni Pro. Yeah.
Yeah, Omni Pro. Yeah, on 2.0.
Yeah.
Yeah. So just a follow up. So you mentioned, siloed systems and Omni and the many ways of interacting. Could there be an iteration or a retailer that is maybe achieved or is fairly close to achieving a customer interaction that is omni-channel? And is there still a benefit for them to make a move to something like unified commerce or to try to bring it all under one product? Or would you recommend that they just stay the course? They're good. They've got everything decently integrated in omni-channel, and they should leave it be? Or is there still a reason they should strive to do something like unified commerce?
Right. I mean, I mean, it's a tough business, right? I mean,
Yeah.
there's always market churn, there's always evolution. I would think that it would be weird for a company to say, well, that's done.
We nailed
That's,
it. We're good.
Yeah, we nailed it. Right. Yeah. That's something no one has ever said ever.
Yep.
So no, I mean, you're always looking for opportunities, and what you need to do if you are in a good position is leverage that, because if you've attained, some sort of a technical or organizational superiority, you got to squeeze every bit of value out of that so that you can, increase your position in the market or protect your share that you've got. So I think there's always pressure to be innovating. It's a very tumultuous environment from a market perspective. So I think at every point you're always trying to squeeze what you can out of it. And I mean, that can also, the fact that it's tumultuous can also paralyze people.
Yeah.
So I think the message there is just, don't try to, like, there's a huge amount of work to be done. Don't try and even necessarily envision what it'll all be. Just, try and pick your best targets for, where am I furthest away? Where is my money best spent? And try and improve in those areas. But at the same time, we're talking, organizationally and, culturally inside the company. So there's lots of avenues that need to be improved. So I don't think you're ever there. And I think what you can do is try and just take a sort of rational, pragmatic approach to saying, okay, we're here, we want to get further down this road. Let's just pick the next step and the next step. I mean, you want to have a vision, but I find that a lot of times that can be paralyzing. You can think, well, I got to throw it all out because, I don't see how I can get there. And that might be true. It's sort of what I term as pathway evolution. You don't know where you can go until you've gone a little ways, right? So let's just go a little ways, just work on what's in front of you. And then sometimes, the evolutionary avenues become apparent over time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah, I think the interesting thing in there is it's also a decision on the ultimate goal, which is the better customer experience, right?
Right.
So changing everything isn't going to necessarily improve the customer experience, right? You still could end up with a system that does a certain amount but doesn't improve the overall customer experience. So those decisions have to still be made on a case by case basis, right?
Mm-hmm.
And trying to swap everything out to achieve it, might be more effort than it's worth. So
Right.
Look at individual, like we talked about all the different channels and the silos. You could try to make sure that at least the key silos are merged, right? And then tackle it that way. It all depends on what you're trying to achieve from a customer perspective. And are you retaining the customer? Are you losing them to a competitor? Are they buying your products? Are they happy with the service? So all those decisions still drive all this stuff. And no amount of technology is ever going to get you 100% of the way there. But it certainly does either block you from getting there or assist you, depending on how it's done.
Yeah, absolutely. As Jeff mentioned, it's a tumultuous business. And, unfortunately, a lot of the people making these decisions don't always have the luxury to look all the way into the future and say, how do I get there as fast as possible? There has to be steps along the way, and they have to be able to prove value and ROI and things like that in making technology purchasing decisions. So they have to factor all that in as well, which is another challenge. Okay, with that, we can segue into my next question, which is why is cloud important to have for unified retail?
Mm.
What role might it play?
I think,
Barry, I'll let you.
from my perspective, cloud, I mean, we do a
Sorry.
lot of work with cloud ourselves, right? So cloud is just a better way of getting everything centralized. If you've got, for example, we work with retailers that have on-premise data centers and architectures. And the more of those that exist, the more things kind of stay static, and it's a little harder to move forward. It's also sometimes challenging to bridge networks between systems and make sure all that unification is really in play. So cloud at least is an enabler to get everything virtualized, to be able to shift platforms and technology into a more, let's say it's a unified environment, right? To get everything there and share the information, because really you're just trying to break down those barriers about what the information is doing within your system. So the more you can put it all in one place, the more you can start allowing that sharing to happen. And then of course, when we talk real time versus latency, if you got it in the cloud, you can control a lot of that real time, as opposed to the systems that are disparate and need different means to communicate. So I think cloud's an enabler is the best way I would say it. It doesn't mean that it's the only way to do it, but it certainly is a very efficient way. And it doesn't really present any roadblocks to getting where you're trying to go, as opposed to maybe trying to piecemeal a bunch of other things together in a different way.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, I see purchasing cloud resources as just a way to reduce my scope of control. So I don't. I'm a retailer. I shouldn't be an expert in all the techs. It's weird how
Right.
many retailers are very familiar with like OS and database layer levels, and
Yeah.
they know exactly what patches they have. It's like, well, okay, you
What
should
it-
be
yeah,
focused more on
yeah.
your key sort of success, and not so much on the enabling technology. So I find that being able to sort of put that behind a wall. I mean, all those decisions have to be made, but you can make them by proxy, and you don't have to get so deeply involved. And you're not making capital expenditures on hardware. You're leasing it month to month. So there's a lot of advantages, I think, to a cloud-based platform for retail.
I like that picture you
Challenges for
painted.
sure, but
Yeah, for sure. I like that picture you painted, Barry, about it being an enabler. Like, there's no way that the accessibility that comes with cloud and the scalability could hurt in an initiative like that, right?
Well, I mean, look at it this way. We talked about the evolution of this, starting with one channel, working our way up to many, and then trying to share the information. Cloud is more dynamic in nature, right? So, like I say, in an on-prem environment, it's more static. You've procured some hardware, you've put it in place, you've got it working exactly the way you want it. Next year, is that the case? You never know, right? You could change your business model, new channels could come in, and it's very inflexible. So I like the sort of dynamic ability to change your architectures, change your business in the cloud with virtualized components, as opposed to having a bunch of physical assets sitting around that you're kind of stuck with until you decide to do something different.
Yeah, maybe they change. Maybe there's something like a global pandemic, and people all of a sudden are only
you
purchasing
never know.
things by pulling up with their cars
That
and rolling down their windows, right?
That's
Yeah.
yeah. That's
Okay,
crazy.
moving on. Next question is, why is unified retail important to a retail company? So I think we've touched on this a bit throughout, but what might be some other reasons that this is something a retailer wants to accomplish in the future or can see on the roadmap? Jeff, please. Sorry.
I mean, I think it breeds brand loyalty, and sort of you make yourself you present yourself to the customer in a way that's more accessible and more responsive to to whatever their needs are. So I think it's just it's not all unified commerce is not all customer based. I mean, that's
Right.
sort of the focus, but you've also got a bunch of disparate systems on the back end that need to come together. And
Yeah.
so, if my customers are ordering, can I tell my 3PLs what that these are the things that I'm seeing moving quickly, and that they'll need replenishment on those sort of
Mhm.
in advance. So I think there's lots of things that can be done, but it's all just about making sure I can move as much of my retail product through my pipeline as possible with hopefully the reason you're trying to make customers loyal and happy is to retain them and to grow your customer base. So all of
Yep.
this is just back to business fundamentals. It's like how can I provide extra value through this channel, hopefully not necessarily through cutting prices, but from making a better experience for the customer and making a better you know allowing them to trust that their interests are well served by me. I'm always going to have the right product because I understand who my customers are and I know sort of where their where their head is in terms of their demographics and in terms of their desires. So I think a lot of this is just I need information to make those decisions better, and
Yep.
the better information I can get, the better I can feed back to them, and the better experience I can give them.
The more I can have a single version of the truth on either side, and not just the customer and what their purchases have been and what they're looking into, but also what's going into it on the back end as well.
Right. And can I align my organization top to bottom around
Yeah.
those goals? Right. So I
Yes.
don't have, the systems sort of precede the organizational alignment, but that comes too, right? So the systems sort of, in a way, sort of add that organizational, it shows where the organization is not necessarily aligned. And so, you've got to move the systems, but you also got to move your organization alignment as at the same time to make everything sort of pay off for you.
hmm Are there, on a vendor to vendor basis, so are there any savings to be had by moving under one vendor, or do you think it's likely null? Like you're looking at a singular platform that can do all these things. So the savings by not having overlapping systems anymore, or what are your thoughts there?
I would think that it still depends on the individual pieces because you if you're working with vendors on this, I can see how there's a lot of cost in trying to unify the systems, right? So if you've got separate systems and you're spending a lot of effort and money and time just trying to make them more act as one, then there's cost there. But at the same time, having a single platform is going to tie
hmm
you down to that platform, right? So
Right.
if you ever wanted to change, it's even harder.
True.
So it's a blend. I mean, I
Yeah.
would still myself prefer to be able to swap out a system and that serves a specific purpose as long as it's connected well into the other systems, because
Right.
maybe I'd like to upgrade that part of it and not lose everything else. So it's interesting because if you ended up with one platform to rule them all,
Yeah.
that's really it. You're going to live with that for as long as possible because changing is just not simple. You'd have to change the world in order to go to another system. So I think that's aligning with what we said earlier, where omni-channel and making the best use of those different components and those systems from different vendors, share the information and work collaboratively. It's probably the best of breed for the near term until we come up with those new categories and the next levels of unification. But it all depends on what you're trying to achieve there. And I've seen some pretty interesting examples of where it's headed. If you look at the stores where they're trying to go without any cashiers and anybody in the store, it's all customers walk in, they grab product, they walk out, and it's purchased, right?
Yep.
Um, Pretty sweet from a cost perspective to not have any staff there, and except maybe at night when they got to stock some shelves. Uh,
hmm
but but at the same time, the possibilities for how you interact, those systems are working with scanning devices. They know where the customers are in the store. There might be RFIDs. There's cameras all over the place watching what's happening. I've read
hmm
about scenarios they're dreaming up where they could have detect that you walk in, you pick up a product, you carry it with you through the store, but before you leave, you sit it down and you
Yes. Yep.
buy a couple things and you go home. But
hmm
in a unified system, when you go home, you could get an email saying, "Hey, that thing you picked up but you didn't buy? It's available on our ecom system, and here's a coupon for you." Right?
Yeah.
And in a unified system, it could do all that for you because it's aware that you were in the brick and mortar and you had an interaction that almost made a purchase, but not quite. and then send that notification to another channel to say, hey, you better hit this person up before you lose that opportunity. So really the unified commerce is a whole new realm of possible ways of interacting. It doesn't mean you can't do it in the other systems. You can focus and get that work done. But I think it's important for the retailers to have those options, and it's got the promise that you could do a lot more.
Mm-hmm. So full disclosure, I will sometimes, when I'm shopping online, go to a store I like, there's something I want, I will sometimes put it in the cart and then leave intentionally, just because I know that there's likely going to be an email coming saying, hey, come back, that thing is now 5% off or 10% off or whatever. So I'll do that intentionally. And then to your point, Barry, in getting a little bit nerdy with the one ring to rule them all. So I could see that it's maybe once you're under one platform or one roof, it can be a little bit challenging. You have a piece, you can't exactly just throw the ring into the fires of Mount Doom and move on to something else. So I thought that was interesting as well.
Yeah.
Okay, so we'll move it into one last question, and then we'll wrap it up for the day. So I think we've also touched on this one a little bit, but we can get into it a bit more. Do you need to overhaul your entire system at once to enter unified commerce? Barry, why don't you kick us off with this one?
Yeah, it sounds like I touched on this a little bit already. My personal opinion is no.
Yeah.
Because I see unified not as the endpoint, just as another tier, and unification is to me, channel to channel knowledge of customer and inventory and all of the above. So I'd say no, you don't have to overhaul everything at once. The dream is that one platform that does it all for you, right? And it knows about everything everywhere. I don't know how you ever get there realistically. Right. So I think it's a system by system basis, generally speaking, and with the key goal, that customer experience, making sure that you're improving the customer experience by making those changes. And if anything, from a business process perspective, improving your processes, as Jeff was saying, to make sure your inventory quantities and all the information you're sharing with the customer is as accurate as possible and as real time as possible, because that's really what we're after.
Exactly. Jeff, any comments?
I would say, if you pose the question, do you need to overhaul your entire system? I would say that would be your last resort. I think you
Right.
should be moving this piece by piece. And if you're looking for someone to come in and do it all, it's just not going to happen. You have to make prudent decisions top to bottom, and you need to be evolving at all times. And if you say I'm going to do this, you're sort of locking yourself in amber too. It's like you're going to be 2 years implementing that, and where are things going to be in 2 years? So no, my strong advice is to, let's move one system at a time, get a little better, and don't try and do everything at once, because you might not be there on the other end of that tunnel, right? Like, so the world might just change on you as you described. Like, we had a global pandemic and everything changed about the market. Like 2 years, that's a long time.
It is, yeah. I think that's sound advice. Do it responsibly. Slow over time usually wins out.
Yep. Prudence. Yep.
Okay, well, thanks for tuning in to this episode of the Red Iron Retail Roundtable, where we discussed unified commerce. Our two panelists, Jeff and Barry, shared their insights and experiences, giving you an in-depth look at how unified commerce strategies can be beneficial to your business. By properly understanding and managing unified commerce, retailers can expect to deliver a seamless customer experience, fewer systems to maintain, and cost savings. For more information regarding Red Iron and unified commerce, visit our website at redirontech.com. Our team of experts are on hand to help you with any questions you may have about how your retail business could best take advantage of this emerging retail strategy. For those who wish to stay up to date on all things related to the retail industry, follow us on Twitter at redirontech. We hope that this podcast has provided you with an insight into how retailers can best make the decisions they need to move to a unified commerce strategy, and we look forward to having you join us in future episodes of the Retail Roundtable. Click subscribe if you like it, and so you never miss an episode. Thanks very much. Goodbye.